They say your wedding day is supposed to be the happiest day of your life. But as I stood at the altar of St. Patrick's Cathedral, listening to the rain hammer against the stained glass like bullets, I didn't feel happiness. I felt the cold grip of a funeral. 15 minutes. That's how long the groom had been missing. The whispers of 300 guests were crawling up my spine, louder than the storm outside. Then my phone buzzed. One text message, 2 words. Good luck. And just like that, my fairy tale shattered. But fate, in its cruel sense of humor, didn't leave me standing there alone for long. Because when the church doors were kicked open, it wasn't my savior walking in. It was New York's darkest nightmare. And he wasn't there to save me. He was there to collect a debt. Welcome to the story of how I became the bride of the devil. 15 minutes. That was exactly how long I had been standing here, alone, at the altar of St. Patrick's Cathedral. The heavy rain outside was hammering against the ancient stained glass windows, creating a dull, rhythmic thrumming sound that felt like a headache pulsing in my temples. It was supposed to be a spring wedding, full of sunlight and promise. Instead, the sky over New York City was a bruised purple, weeping buckets of cold water onto the streets below. Inside, the air was thick. It smelled of expensive lilies and damp wool. To me, it did not smell like a celebration. It smelled like a funeral. Behind me, the 300 guests were beginning to shift in their seats. The sound of their whispers started low, like the rustling of dry leaves, but it was growing louder by the second. I could feel their eyes boring into my back. They were not looking at me with admiration anymore. They were looking at me with pity. Or worse, with hunger. They were vultures waiting for a carcass. Where is the groom? I heard the Morelli family finally broke them. Look at her shaking, poor little rich girl. I squeezed the bouquet of white roses so hard that the thorns dug through the silk ribbon and pierced my palms. The sharp sting of pain was the only thing keeping me grounded. My father was sitting in the front row. I did not need to turn around to know that his face was pale, his hands trembling as he wiped sweat from his upper lip. He knew. He knew why Liam was late. Suddenly, the phone I had hidden beneath the cascading flowers of my bouquet vibrated. One buzz, short, violent against my skin. My heart stopped. I looked down, trying to be subtle, trying to maintain the illusion of the perfect, blushing bride for just 1 second longer. The screen lit up with a harsh blue light, illuminating the name I had been praying to see for the last 15 minutes. Liam. My fingers were ice cold as I slid the phone open. There was just one text message. I am sorry, Elena. I cannot pay the money. If I stay, he will kill me. I am leaving. Good luck. Good luck. 2 words. 2 simple words that shattered my entire world into a million jagged pieces. My breath hitched in my throat. The air in the cathedral seemed to vanish. I could not breathe. My chest felt like it was being crushed by a giant stone. Liam had not just left me. He had fed me to the wolves. He was the one who borrowed the money. He was the one who made the deal with the devil. And my father, in his infinite wisdom to save his failing real estate empire, had offered me up as the collateral. The phone slipped from my numb fingers. It hit the marble floor with a loud crack that echoed through the silent church like a gunshot. The screen shattered, spiderwebbing just like my life. A collective gasp went through the pews. My mother let out a strangled sob. I stood there, frozen. I should run. My brain was screaming at me to run. Kick off these heels, hike up this $10,000 Vera Wang dress, and sprint out the side door. But my feet felt like they were encased in concrete. And then the atmosphere shifted. It was not a gradual change. It was instant. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The temperature in the vast room seemed to drop 10 degrees in a heartbeat. Boom. The massive oak doors at the entrance of the cathedral did not just open. They were kicked in. A gust of wind and rain swept into the sanctuary, blowing out the candles lining the aisle. The sudden darkness made people scream. But the screams were cut short as shadows poured in from the storm. Men, at least 20 of them. They were dressed in black suits that were soaked with rain. They moved with military precision, spreading out, blocking every single exit. In their hands, they held automatic weapons. The sound of safety catches clicking off rippled through the room. Click, click, click. It was louder than the thunder outside. The guests froze. The whispers died instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and terrified. Even the priest, Father Thomas, stepped back, his hands shaking so hard he nearly dropped his Bible. Then the sea of black suits parted, and he walked in. Dante Morelli. I had never seen him in person, only in grainy newspaper photos or whispered warnings, but I knew exactly who he was. You did not live in New York and not know the capo of the Morelli crime family. He was taller than I imagined, over 6 feet 3 inches of pure lethal power. He did not run, he did not rush. He walked down the center aisle as if he owned the church, as if he owned God himself. His black suit was impeccable, tailored to fit broad shoulders that carried the weight of a criminal empire. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the top, revealing a glimpse of tanned skin and the edge of a dark tattoo. He was drenched from the rain, water dripping from his dark hair onto his sharp cheekbones, but he did not seem to notice. His shoes hit the stone floor with a rhythmic, terrifying cadence. Thud, thud, thud. He did not look at the guests who were cowering in the pews. He did not look at my father, who looked like he was having a heart attack. His eyes were locked on me. They were gray, not the soft gray of a morning mist, but the hard, cold gray of steel and storms. I could not look away. I was paralyzed, trapped in the predator's gaze. As he reached the altar, the scent of him hit me. He smelled of rain, ozone, expensive tobacco, and something metallic, like fresh blood. He stopped right in front of me. He was so close that his heat radiated toward me, warming my shivering skin. He looked down at the shattered phone on the floor. With the toe of his expensive Italian leather shoe, he kicked the device aside, sending it skittering under a pew. Then he looked at me. Up close, he was devastatingly handsome, in a way that made your stomach twist. But it was a cruel beauty, a beauty that warned you to keep your distance. "The groom is fast," Dante said. His voice was deep, a low rumble that vibrated in the floorboards beneath my feet. It was not loud, but in the silent church, it carried to the back row. "But he is a coward." I tried to speak, but my voice was stuck in my throat. I swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that were burning my eyes. He is gone," I whispered, my voice barely audible. I do not have the money." Dante tilted his head slightly. A small, humorless smile played on his lips. It did not reach his eyes. "I know you do not have the money, Elena," he said. The way his tongue curled around my name felt like a caress and a threat all at once. "And I did not come here for the cash. The contract was clear." He took a step closer. I stepped back, bumping into the altar behind me. There was nowhere left to go. He reached out. I flinched, expecting a blow, but instead his large hand, rough with calluses, grasped my chin. His grip was firm, possessive. He forced my face up, making me look at him. "Look at me," he commanded softly. "Do not look at your father. He sold you. Look at your owner." Tears finally spilled over, hot tracks running down my cold cheeks. "Please," I choked out, "please just let me go." "Let you go?" Dante chuckled darkly. "No, Liam ran away. That creates a void in the contract, a void that needs to be filled." He let go of my chin and reached into his pocket. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Was he reaching for a gun? Was he going to kill me right here in front of God and everyone? But he did not pull out a weapon. He pulled out a small black velvet box. He flicked it open with his thumb. Inside sat a ring. It was silver, shaped like a skull, with eyes made of black diamonds. It was grotesque. It was beautiful. It was a shackle. He grabbed my left hand. His fingers were warm, strong, and unrelenting. "The wedding is not canceled, little bird," he whispered, leaning down so his lips brushed against the shell of my ear. Shivers cascaded down my spine, a mix of terror and a strange electric shock. The groom fled at the altar, but the wedding is not over. I will take his place. Wait. Can you feel the chill running down Elena's spine right now? Before Dante pronounces the final sentence, I am very curious to know where you are holding your breath while following this story. Are you in the United States, Australia, the United Kingdom, Canada, or some city elsewhere in the world. Please comment your country and city below right now to mark your attendance with the Morelli Groom's side. And now, let us get back to the devil. Do not cry, Dante repeated, his voice a low vibration against my skin. The groom is gone, but the wedding is not over. I will take his place. Before my brain could even process the absurdity of his statement, Dante snapped his fingers. The sound was sharp, cutting through the heavy silence of the cathedral. Instantly, the wall of black-suited men moved. Like a synchronized machine, they raised their automatic weapons, but they did not aim at the ceiling. They aimed at the front row, at my parents. My mother let out a strangled scream, clutching her chest. My father froze, his eyes bulging in terror as red laser sights danced on his forehead. No! I gasped, instinctively grabbing Dante's forearm. His muscle was hard as rock beneath the expensive fabric of his suit. Stop it! Do not hurt them! Dante did not even look at them. He looked at Father Thomas. The old priest was trembling so violently that the pages of his Bible were fluttering. He looked ready to bolt toward the sacristy door. Dante simply shifted his gaze. He looked at the priest, then glanced at a silver pistol lying casually on the edge of the altar, right next to the communion wine. Father, Dante said, his voice deceptively polite, continue the ceremony, skip the sermon, go straight to the vows. The priest swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He looked at the guns pointed at the congregation, then back at the devil standing before him. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I said, Dante's voice dropped an octave, turning into a growl. Continue. As the priest stammered through the Latin phrases, my mind fractured. The reality of the moment blurred with a memory from just 1 week ago. Flashback. I was standing outside my father's study in our Upper East Side penthouse. The door was ajar. I heard voices. Raised. Desperate. $50 million, George! That was Liam's voice. He sounded panicked. You told me it was 5. You told me if I signed as the guarantor, it was just a formality. Calm down, Liam. My father's voice was soothing, manipulative. The deal will go through next month. We just need to bridge the gap. Morelli gave us the loan. Morelli? Liam screeched. You borrowed from Dante Morelli? Are you insane? If we miss a payment, he doesn't send lawyers, George. He sends executioners. We won't miss it. And besides, my father's voice dropped, becoming colder. I put up a collateral that ensures you will stay committed to this family. If you run, the debt falls on the collateral, and the collateral is Elena. End of flashback. I blinked, bringing myself back to the cold, stone reality of St. Patrick's Cathedral. Liam knew. He knew that if he ran, I would be the one to pay, and he ran anyway. A cold sensation on my hand snapped me to attention. Dante was sliding the ring onto my finger. It was not a band of love. It was a heavy, silver skull, its black diamond eyes staring up at me. It felt like ice. It felt like a shackle. It slid over my knuckle and settled at the base of my finger. It fit perfectly, painfully so. The priest looked at Dante, sweat dripping down his pale face. Do you, Dante? Skip it, Dante interrupted. He did not let go of my hand. He squeezed it, crushing my fingers together until I winced. He looked straight into my eyes, and for a second, the rest of the world vanished. There was only the storm in his gray eyes. I, Dante Morelli, he spoke clearly, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings, take you as my property. From this day forward, until the debt is paid in full, or until I decide I am done with you. My breath hitched. This was not a vow, it was a sentence. The priest turned to me, his eyes pleading. Elena, do you... She does, Dante answered for me. He reached out with his free hand and pulled a gun from his holster. Without looking, he fired a single shot into a massive vase of white lilies beside the altar. Bang! Glass exploded, water and flowers sprayed everywhere. The guests screamed and ducked. She accepts, Dante said calmly, blowing a wisp of smoke from the barrel of his gun. Kiss the bride, or I will start shooting out the kneecaps of everyone in the first 3 rows. The priest hastily made the sign of the cross. I pronounce you man and wife. Dante holstered the weapon. He stepped into my personal space, his tall frame blocking out the lights. He lowered his head. I squeezed my eyes shut. bracing for a kiss that would taste like violence. But his lips did not touch mine. He stopped inches away. His hot breath ghosted over my mouth. "Now," he whispered, loud enough for the microphone to catch, sending his dark promise booming through the speakers. "Pray for your wedding night, little wife, because I am not gentle like that coward Liam." Before I could react, he bent down. One arm hooked behind my knees, the other around my back. He swept me up into his arms effortlessly, as if I weighed nothing more than a bag of feathers. "Put me down," I gasped, hitting his chest. He ignored me. He turned around and walked back down the aisle, carrying me past the sea of terrified faces. Over his shoulder, I saw my parents. My father was not looking at me. He was looking at the floor, relief washing over his face because he was still alive. We reached the massive doors. The wind was still howling outside. Dante stepped out into the storm, carrying me into the darkness. Behind us, the heavy doors of the cathedral slammed shut with a final ominous boom. The rain was a deluge. Within seconds, my hair was plastered to my face, and my expensive dress was soaked heavy with water. But Dante did not stop. He marched down the stone steps toward a sleek, black, armored limousine idling at the curb. The back door flew open. I was unceremoniously tossed inside. I scrambled across the black leather seats, trying to put distance between us, but there was nowhere to go. Dante climbed in after me. His presence filled the cabin, sucking out all the oxygen. The door slammed shut, sealing us in. "Drive, Enzo," Dante commanded. I looked toward the front. A glass partition separated us from the driver. Through the glass, I saw the back of a man's head. He had a thick neck and a jagged scar running from behind his ear down into his collar. He did not turn around. The car surged forward, merging smoothly into the chaotic New York traffic. It was quiet inside, too quiet. The sound of the rain was muffled by the bulletproof glass. The air conditioning hummed softly. Dante leaned back against the seat, stretching his long legs out. He looked entirely too comfortable for a man who had just held an entire church hostage. He reached into a hidden compartment and pulled out a cigar and a silver cutter. Snip. The sound was sharp. He lit it, and within moments, the small space was filled with the thick, rich scent of tobacco and masculine musk. It overpowered the delicate smell of my rain-soaked roses. "You cannot do this," I said, my voice trembling but gaining a fraction of strength. "This is kidnapping. The police." Dante laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. "The police? Half the precinct is on my payroll, Elena, and the other half is too scared to pull over a car with my plates." He reached for a manila folder sitting on the seat next to him and tossed it onto my lap. "Read it." I hesitated, my hands shaking as I picked up the folder. I opened it. It was a contract dated 3 months ago. My eyes scanned the legal jargon, but certain words jumped out at me. Loan agreement, $50 million. Collateral, Elena Vance. And at the bottom, my father's signature. But there was another document underneath, a surveillance report. Subject, Liam Miller. Notes. Subject has agreed to flee the country on the wedding day in exchange for debt forgiveness from George Vance. Ticket purchased to the Cayman Islands. I felt like I was going to be sick. "Liam did not just run because he was scared," Dante said, watching me through a haze of smoke. "Your father paid him to run. Your father knew he could not pay me back. So he staged this whole wedding to default on the loan specifically so I would come and collect you." The paper slipped from my hands. "No," I whispered, "that's not true. My father loves me." "Your father loves his company," Dante corrected ruthlessly. "He sold you to me to save his skyscrapers. You are not a bride, Elena. You are a payment." Rage, hot and blinding, replaced my fear. They had all used me. Liam, my father, even this monster sitting across from me. I looked out the window. The car was slowing down to take a sharp turn. I did not think, I just acted. I lunged for the door handle. "I am not going with you," I screamed. I yanked the handle. The door clicked open an inch. The roar of the traffic and the rain rushed in. But before I could throw myself out, a hand tangled into my wet hair. "Ah!" Dante yanked me back with brutal force. He slammed me down onto the leather seat, his body looming over mine, pinning me down. "Are you trying to die?" He snarled, his face inches from mine. His eyes were blazing with anger. "Do you think you can jump out of a moving car and survive?" I was panting, my chest heaving against his. The space between us was electric. I could feel the hardness of his chest, the heat radiating from him. It was terrifying, but God help me, it was intoxicating too. Better dead than with you, I spat. Dante stared at me. His gaze dropped to my thigh. The slit in my wedding dress had torn further during the struggle, revealing the lace garter and the handle of the small dagger I had strapped there this morning. A little something blue for self-defense. He reached down. I tried to kick him, but his legs pinned mine. His hand slid up my thigh, warm and rough against my skin. I gasped, but he was not groping me. He grabbed the handle of the dagger and pulled it out. He sat up, twirling the small blade between his fingers. He looked at it, then at me, a smirk playing on his lips. He rolled down the window and tossed the knife out into the rainy night. You plan to use this on me tonight? He asked, sounding amused rather than angry. Good. I like a woman with claws. He grabbed my chin again, forcing me to look at him. Keep that anger, Elena. Hold on to it tight, because you are going to need it to survive in your new home. The car came to a smooth stop. I looked out the window. We were in front of massive iron gates. Beyond them stood a fortress of dark stone, surrounded by high walls topped with electric fencing. Welcome to hell, Mrs. Morelli, Dante whispered. The gates groaned open, swallowing the car into the darkness of the estate. The mansion was cold, not just temperature cold, but spiritually empty. It was a palace of marble and shadows. Dante did not carry me inside. He dragged me by the hand, pulling me through the grand foyer. An older woman was waiting at the bottom of the staircase. She wore a severe black uniform, her gray hair pulled back into a tight bun. Her face was a mask of indifference. Rena! Dante barked. Clean her up. Get rid of that dress. I do not want her smelling like that coward Liam or her father's cheap cologne. Rena nodded once. Yes, sir. She stepped forward and gripped my arm. Her fingers were like steel claws. Come with me. I was led up the winding staircase, down a long corridor lined with portraits of men who all had Dante's cruel eyes, and into a bathroom that was larger than my entire apartment. Strip, Rena ordered. For the next hour, I was scrubbed. It was not a pampering spa treatment. It was a decontamination. Rena scrubbed my skin until it was raw and pink, washing away the scent of the church, the rain, and my past life. When she was done, she did not give me clothes. She gave me a slip of silk so thin it was almost transparent. Go, she pointed to the adjoining door. He is waiting. I stepped into the master bedroom. It was vast. The walls were painted a deep charcoal gray. In the center of the room sat a massive king-sized bed with black sheets. But Dante was not there. I stood in the middle of the room, shivering. Minutes ticked by, then an hour, 2 hours. The silence was deafening. It was a torture technique, I was sure of it. Making me wait, making my imagination run wild with all the terrible things he might do to me. I started looking for a weapon, a heavy lamp, a vase. Suddenly, the handle of the bathroom door turned. I froze. Dante stepped out. He had showered. His hair was damp, falling over his forehead, making him look younger, less like a demon. He was not wearing a shirt. My breath caught in my throat. His torso was a masterpiece of violence. Scars, some jagged, some straight lines from knives, some circular from bullets, crisscrossed his tanned skin, and amidst the scars were tattoos. Intricate, dark ink that seemed to tell the story of 1,000 sins. A towel hung low on his hips, dangerously loose. He did not lunge at me, he did not attack. He walked over to a crystal decanter and poured 2 glasses of red wine. The sound of the liquid hitting the glass was the only sound in the room. He turned and held a glass out to me. Drink, he said softly, to celebrate escaping a marriage based on lies. I stared at the glass. Is it drugged? Dante's eyes narrowed. He brought the glass to his own lips and downed it in one swallow. Then, he hurled the empty crystal glass against the wall behind my head. Smash! I screamed and covered my head. Shards of crystal rained down on the carpet. I do not need drugs to make women submit, Elena, he growled. He closed the distance between us in 2 strides. He backed me up until my shoulders hit the cold wall. He placed his hands on the wall on either side of my head, caging me in. You think I am going to rape you? He asked, his voice low, husky, and dangerous. I looked up at him, trembling. You said I am your property. You are, he agreed. But I am a businessman. and I do not like taking things that are not given freely. He reached into his pocket. Wait, he was just wearing a towel. He reached over to the nightstand and picked up a tablet. He tapped the screen and shoved it in front of my face. It was a live video feed. My stomach dropped. It was Liam. He was tied to a chair in a dark, concrete room. His mouth was taped shut with silver duct tape. He was crying, tears streaming down his bruised face. A gun was pressed against his temple, held by a hand I could not see. Liam, I whispered. Dante leaned in, his lips brushing my ear. Here is the deal, wife, he murmured. Take off the dress. Voluntarily. Come to my bed. If you satisfy me tonight, if you make me believe you want to be here, he lives. He pulled back to look at me, his eyes gleaming with cruelty. But if you cry, if you fight me, or if you hesitate, he tapped the screen. The trigger gets pulled. Tonight, the way you serve me decides if your ex-fiancé sees the sunrise. The choice is yours, Elena. My heart hammered against my ribs like a war drum. Oh my God, Elena is trapped. Save the man who betrayed her by sacrificing her own dignity? Or let him die and keep her pride? If you were in her shoes, what would you choose? Would you save Liam or let him die? I am dying to know if morality or revenge wins in your heart tonight. Please comment, save or let him die, followed by the country you are living in. For example, let him die, from California. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel right now to see what Elena decides in the next part. I woke up alone. Consciousness returned to me slowly, pulling me out of a feverish, disjointed nightmare where I was running through a maze of thorns. My body felt heavy, sinking deep into the mattress of a bed that was large enough to sleep 4 people. I reached out instinctively, my hand brushing across the empty space beside me. The black silk sheets felt cool and slippery against my skin, a sharp, tactile contrast to the suffocating heat of the memories that came flooding back. The cathedral, the rain, the gun, the ultimatum. Take off the dress or Liam dies. I had taken it off. I had stood there, shivering, stripped of my silk and my dignity, waiting for the beast to claim his prize. But Dante Morelli had not touched me. He had stood there, a towel low on his hips, watching me with those storm-gray eyes that seemed to strip away my soul layer by layer. He had looked satisfied, not because he lusted after my body, but because he had broken my spirit. Then, he had simply turned off the lights and ordered me to sleep. It was a mercy. Or perhaps it was the cruelest mind game of all, leaving me to wonder why I wasn't enough or when the other shoe would drop. I sat up, pushing my hair back. The room was bathed in the soft, oppressive gray light of a cloudy New York morning. The floor-to-ceiling windows looked out onto a gray sky, barring me from the world I used to know. I spotted a silk robe draped over the foot of the bed. It was black, of course. Everything in this house seemed to be devoid of color. I put it on, tying the belt tight around my waist as if the thin fabric could hold my falling-apart life together. I walked to the door. I turned the handle, expecting it to be locked. Click. It opened. I stepped out into the hallway. The mansion was silent, but it was not a peaceful silence. It was the silence of a predator lying in wait. The architecture was cold. High ceilings, marble floors, dark wood paneling. It felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum. As I walked to the railing of the grand staircase, I looked down into the foyer. Guards. They were everywhere. 2 men stood like statues by the massive double front doors. One stood at the bottom of the stairs, his eyes scanning the space with mechanical precision. Another patrolled the entrance to the east wing. They were dressed in black suits, earpieces coiled behind their ears, bulges under their jackets hinting at the violence they carried. I was not a guest. I was a prisoner in a high tower, and the dragon was keeping watch. I walked down the stairs. My bare feet made no sound on the cold marble, but the guard at the bottom turned his head as I approached. He did not speak. He just watched me, his face a mask of indifference. The smell of fresh, strong coffee drifted through the air, acting as a lifeline. I followed it down a corridor, past rooms filled with furniture that looked too expensive to sit on until I found the dining room. It was a long, cavernous room with a mahogany table that stretched out like a runway. At the far end, only one person was seated. He was not Dante. He was a man in his late 30s, possessing a sharp, angular face. He wore rimless glasses and a charcoal suit that was tailored to perfection. He was reading a newspaper, an actual paper one, not a tablet, and a cup of espresso steamed by his hand. He looked like a university professor or a high-end corporate lawyer, but then he looked up, and the illusion shattered. His eyes were dark, calculating, and completely devoid of warmth. They were the eyes of a man who knew how to bury bodies without getting dirt under his fingernails. "Good morning, Mrs. Morelli," he said. His voice was smooth, polite, but it carried an undertone of steel. I stopped in the doorway, tightening my grip on my robe. "Who are you?" "Marco," he replied, gesturing to the empty chair opposite him with a manicured hand. "I am Dante's consigliere, his advisor, his problem solver. Please, sit." I did not move. "Where is he?" "The dawn is out," Marco said, taking a slow sip of his coffee. "He is handling the leftovers of the wedding, cleaning up the mess your father and ex-fiancé left behind. He asked me to welcome you and to explain the rules of your new reality." "Rules?" I scoffed, a spark of my old self flaring up. I walked over and pulled out a heavy wooden chair, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. "I am a wife, Marco, not an employee, and certainly not a child." "Here!" Marco slid a thin black leather folder across the polished table. It stopped perfectly in front of me. "You are an investment, Elena, a very expensive one, and high-value investments require strict protocols to ensure they do not depreciate." I stared at the folder. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. It was a list, short, brutal, typed on heavy bond paper. "Rule number 1, you do not leave the estate grounds without Enzo, ever. The perimeter is alarmed. If you cross it alone, the dogs will be released. Rule number 2, no contact with your previous life, no phone, no internet, no letters. You are dead to the world outside these walls. Rule number 3, you represent the Morelli family now. You will attend all functions. You will smile. You will be silent unless spoken to." "This is insane," I whispered, slamming the folder shut. "I am not signing this. I need to call my parents. My mother. She has a weak heart. She must be worried sick after what happened at the church." Marco sighed, a sound of mild irritation. He adjusted his glasses, then reached into his leather briefcase sitting on the floor. He pulled out a photograph. He slid it across the table, face down. "Your mother is currently under sedation in a private clinic in Switzerland. We sent her there this morning on a private jet. Ideally, the mountain air will be good for her nerves." "You kidnapped my mother?" I stood up, my chair toppling over behind me with a crash. "You monster!" "We protected her," Marco corrected calmly, not even blinking. "She is safe, fed, and cared for, as long as you follow the rules. As for your father—" He tapped the face-down photograph with a single finger. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of fear. "What did you do to him?" "Look." I did not want to look, but I had to. With trembling fingers, I flipped the photo over. It was a grainy picture taken at night, lit by the harsh glare of police lights. It showed a twisted wreck of metal and shattered glass on a highway. A car, my father's vintage Jaguar E-Type. It was crushed against a concrete guardrail, smoke billowing from the engine. The driver's side was obliterated. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a scream. Tears pricked my eyes instantly. Is he dead?" "Not yet," Marco said, his voice flat, discussing a car crash with the same emotion as discussing the weather. "It was a warning, a reminder that accidents happen when debts are not honored. Dante is a man of his word, Elena. He promised to collect. He has you. But your father, he tried to run last night after the ceremony. He thought he could outrun the Morelli ghosts. We had to stop him." "Where is he?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "I want to see him." Marco stood up, buttoning his jacket. He smiled, a thin, bloodless expression that made my blood run cold. He is safe, for now. He is resting comfortably in our basement. The doctors are patching him up. He walked over to a side table where a maid had just placed a large black box tied with a satin ribbon. Dante wants to give you a surprise wedding gift tonight. You should prepare yourself mentally, Elena. We have a dinner party. The entire underworld will be there to see the new bride. I am not going, I hissed. You are going, Marco said softly, leaning closer. Because tonight, you will have to hold a gun. Dante does not feed useless mouths. And if you want your father to survive the night, you will wear this dress, and you will do exactly what Dante says. The maid opened the box. Inside lay a dress. It was floor-length, made of silk as red as fresh arterial blood. It shimmered in the light, looking like a pool of liquid violence, and nestled in the red fabric, gleaming under the chandelier light, was a small silver pistol. It was beautiful. It was deadly. I stared at the gun. My reflection in the polished silver barrel looked back at me, pale, terrified, but with a spark of something new in my eyes. It wasn't just fear anymore, it was hatred, and beneath the hatred, determination. The music was loud, it vibrated through the floorboards, a soaring, tragic aria from a classical opera that filled the grand ballroom of the Morelli estate. I stood in front of the full-length gilded mirror in the master bedroom. The red dress fit like a second skin. It was scandalous. It had a plunging neckline that stopped just above my navel, and a slit that went all the way up my thigh, exposing leg with every step. It was a dress designed to distract, to seduce, and to proclaim ownership. But the most important accessory wasn't the diamond necklace Dante had sent up, a choker of ice that felt heavy on my throat. It was the cold weight of the silver pistol. I had strapped it to my thigh with a black lace garter. The metal was cool against my warm skin, a constant reminder of the violence that underpinned this glamorous world. I smoothed the red silk over it, invisible to the eye but heavy on my soul. The door handle turned. I didn't flinch. I watched in the mirror as Dante entered. He was breathtaking. He wore a black tuxedo tailored to perfection, the crisp white shirt accentuating his deep tan. His hair was slicked back, revealing the sharp angles of his face. He looked like a prince from a dark fairy tale. He stopped when he saw me. The air in the room shifted. It became thicker, charged with electricity. His gray eyes raked over my body, starting from my heels, traveling up the slit of my dress, lingering on my hips, and finally locking onto my eyes. His pupils dilated. The look was intense, a mix of hunger, pride, and terrifying possessiveness. He walked over and stood behind me. He did not touch me at first. He just looked at our reflection. The dark night and the lady in red. Red, he murmured, his voice rough like gravel grinding together. The color of war. Is that what this is? I asked, meeting his gaze in the glass. A war? Tonight? Yes, he replied, placing his large, warm hands on my bare shoulders. The heat from his palms seeped into my skin, making me shiver. Don Salvatore will be there. He is a vulture. He thinks I am weak because I took a wife from a bankrupt family. He thinks I am distracted. Tonight, you need to show him that you are not a weakness. His hand slid down my arm, sending goosebumps erupting across my skin. You are a weapon, Elena, my weapon. I have never fired a gun, Dante, I whispered. I don't know if I can. Then pray you do not have to, he whispered, leaning down to kiss the sensitive curve of my neck. His lips were hot, branding me. Keep your head high. If you bow, the crown falls. And if the crown falls, the wolves will tear out your throat. He offered me his arm. I took it. We walked out of the room, down the corridor, and to the top of the grand staircase. Below us, the ballroom was a sea of black and white. Men in tuxedos holding crystal glasses, discussing murder and extortion as if it were the stock market. Women in couture gowns, dripping in jewels that were likely stolen, their eyes sharp and calculating. When we appeared, the music didn't stop, but the conversation did. A hush fell over the room. Hundreds of eyes turned upward. Dante gripped my waist, pulling me flush against his hard side. Smile, he commanded under his breath. I forced my lips into a cold, haughty smile. We descended the stairs like royalty. Every eye was on the red dress. I felt like a blood stain on a pristine white canvas. Morelli, a booming voice echoed near the champagne fountain. An older man pushed through the crowd. He had a thick neck, a face scarred by teenage pox, and eyes that looked like wet stones. He held a cigar in one hand and a glass of scotch in the other. Don Salvatore, the rival. "I heard you got married," Salvatore sneered, not bothering to extend a hand. He looked me up and down, his gaze lingering on my chest with undisguised disgust and lust. "To the Vance girl? Did you buy her at an auction or did you just steal her from the clearance rack?" Dante's hand tightened on my waist. His fingers dug into my hip bone, painful and grounding. "I claimed what was mine, Salvatore," Dante said, his voice deceptively calm, but carrying to the corners of the room. "A concept you would not understand, seeing as you still rent your company and your women by the hour." A ripple of nervous laughter went through the crowd. Salvatore's face turned a shade of ugly purple. "Watch your mouth, boy," Salvatore spat, stepping closer, invading our personal space. "Or you might find your pretty new toy broken before the honeymoon is over." Dante stepped forward, shielding me with his body. The air crackled with the promise of violence. But before Dante could strike, he checked himself. He grabbed my arm. "Come," he said abruptly to me, turning his back on Salvatore, the ultimate insult. "It is time for your gift." He led me away from the crowd, through a heavy oak door near the kitchen, and down a flight of narrow stone stairs. The music faded, replaced by the hum of industrial ventilation and the smell of damp earth and bleach. The basement. He stopped in front of a heavy steel door. He unlocked it. In the center of the concrete room, tied to a wooden chair, sat my father. He looked terrible. His face was swollen, one eye shut completely. His expensive suit was torn, stained with dirt and blood. He smelled of sweat and fear. When he saw me, he started to cry. Elena, baby!" he sobbed, struggling against the ropes. Tell him to let me go. I'm your father." I stood frozen. This was the man who had bought me my first pony. This was the man who had walked me to school. This was the man who had told me he loved me every night. And this was the man who had sold me to a monster to save his buildings. Dante walked over to a metal table and picked up a hunting knife. The blade gleamed under the singular light bulb. He walked back to me and pressed the handle into my hand. "He sold you, Elena," Dante said, his voice echoing in the small room. "But that is not all. He hired a hitman to take me out at the wedding. If I died, the debt would be canceled. He was willing to turn your wedding day into a bloodbath, risking your life just to save his own skin." I looked at my father, horror dawning on me. "Is it true?" My father's eyes darted around the room. "I had to. If I didn't, we would lose everything. The penthouses, the cars, the reputation. You ungrateful girl. If you had just been better, if you had just kept Liam happy, none of this would have happened. You are useless." Useless. That word struck me harder than a bullet. Something inside me snapped. The little girl who wanted to please her daddy died in that damp basement. I gripped the knife. My hand was shaking, but not from fear, from rage. "Here is the test," Dante whispered behind me, his breath hot on my ear. "His fate is in your hands. Kill him, and you are free of the past. Or cut him loose, and never see me again." I stepped toward my father. He shrank back, terrified of the look in my eyes. I raised the knife. Suddenly the lights went out. Pitch blackness. Crash. The sound of breaking glass shattered the silence upstairs. Then came the gunfire. Bang, bang, bang. It was coming from the ballroom. Screams filtered down through the ventilation shafts. Then a deafening explosion rocked the basement. A bullet tore through the small basement window high up on the wall, shattering the glass. I felt a stinging heat graze my cheek. "Get down!" Dante roared. He tackled me. His heavy body slammed into mine, driving me to the concrete floor. He covered me with his own body, shielding me as debris and glass rained down on us. "We are under attack," he hissed into my ear. "Salvatore brought an army." Chaos, pure, unadulterated chaos. Dante dragged me up from the concrete floor. The basement was filling with dust and smoke from the explosion. My father was screaming in the corner, still tied to the chair, begging us not to leave him, but Dante ignored him completely. "Move!" Dante ordered, shoving me toward the door. He kicked the steel door open, his gun already drawn. We ran into the hallway. It was no longer the quiet service corridor. It was a war zone. The expensive wallpaper was riddled with bullet holes. The bodies of 2 guards lay on the floor, blood pooling on the pristine tiles. "Keep your head down and stay behind me," Dante shouted over the roar of automatic gunfire echoing from the ballroom above. He fired 2 shots. 2 men in ski masks appeared at the end of the corridor. They dropped instantly. Dante moved with terrifying efficiency, a machine built for killing. He didn't hesitate. He didn't blink. I clutched the skirt of my red dress, stumbling after him in my heels. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would explode. We reached the kitchen. It was on fire. A grease fire had started on the massive industrial stove, sending thick black smoke billowing toward the ceiling, choking the air. 3 men burst in from the service entrance. They were not guests, they were assassins. Dante shot the first one in the chest. He spun around, moving like a dancer, and shot the second one in the head. But the third man, he was too close to me. He lunged. I saw the glint of a knife. I fell back against the stainless steel counter, knocking over a rack of pans. The crash was deafening. The man raised the knife, his eyes manic behind the holes of his mask. "Die, bitch!" he screamed. I froze. Time seemed to slow down. I could see the sweat on his forehead. I could smell his bad breath. Then I remembered. The gun, the cold weight on my thigh. I fumbled with the skirt of my dress, my hands slick with sweat. My fingers found the cold metal handle. I ripped it from the lace garter. The man was inches away. The knife was coming down. I squeezed the trigger. I did not aim. I just pointed and squeezed. Bang! The recoil was shocking. It nearly broke my wrist. The sound was deafening in the tiled room, ringing in my ears like a bell. The man jerked back violently. A spray of red mist hit the white subway tiles behind him. I had hit him in the shoulder. He screamed, dropping the knife and clutching his wound, falling to his knees. I stood there, shaking uncontrollably, the smoking gun still in my hand. I stared at the man writhing on the floor. I felt bile rise in my throat. I had just shot someone. I had just pulled a trigger. I had just pulled a... Elena! Dante was there instantly. He didn't comfort me. He put 2 bullets into the wounded man, silencing him forever. He grabbed my face, his hands covered in soot and blood, forcing me to look at him. "Look at me!" he shouted. "You did good! You are alive! That is all that matters! Now run!" He grabbed my hand and we sprinted out the back door into the night. The rain was pouring down in sheets, a torrential downpour that soaked us instantly. We ran toward the garage, slipping on the wet cobblestones. "The car!" I yelled. "No," Dante pulled me back. The armored SUV was there, but it was blocked. A burning truck had crashed into the garage entrance. Enzo was nowhere to be seen. "Damn it," Dante cursed, wiping rain from his eyes. He pulled me toward a small landscaping shed. He kicked the wooden door in. Inside, covered in a tarp, was a black Ducati motorcycle. "Get on," he commanded, mounting the bike. "In this dress?" I cried hysterically. "I can't!" "Hiking it up or die, Elena. Make a choice." I swallowed my fear. I gathered the red silk in my hands, hiking it up to my waist, and climbed on behind him. I wrapped my arms around his waist, pressing my chest against his soaked back. He kicked the engine to life. The bike roared like a beast waking up. We shot out of the shed. Dante gunned the throttle. We swerved past the burning cars, dodging bullets that sparked against the pavement. We hit the main road. The wind whipped my wet hair into my face, blinding me. The rain stung my skin like 1,000 needles. Dante drove like a madman, weaving through traffic at 100 miles an hour. I buried my face in his back, smelling the gunpowder, the rain, and the metallic scent of blood on his jacket. We rode for what felt like an eternity. An hour? 2? We left the city lights far behind, heading deep into the wooded hills of upstate New York. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a bone-deep cold. Finally, Dante slowed down. He turned onto a gravel path that was barely visible in the dark. We bumped along the rough road until we stopped in front of a small, abandoned hunting cabin hidden in the dense trees. The engine died. The silence of the forest was overwhelming, broken only by the sound of the rain hitting the leaves. Dante tried to get off the bike. He swung his leg over, but his foot didn't find purchase. He stumbled. "Dante?" He fell to his knees in the mud. I scrambled off the bike, nearly tripping over my dress. "Dante!" I ran to him. He was breathing heavily, ragged gasps that sounded like a broken bellows. The moonlight broke through the clouds, illuminating his white shirt, which was now translucent from the rain. It was red, entirely horrifyingly red. You're bleeding, I gasped, my hands hovering over his side, afraid to touch him. I pressed my hand against his ribs. The blood was warm and sticky, oozing through his shirt. Oh my God, you're shot! He must have taken a bullet for me back in the basement when he shielded me from the glass. Or maybe in the kitchen. He had ridden for an hour, steering a heavy motorcycle at breakneck speeds, bleeding out just to get me to safety. He looked up at me. His face was pale, almost gray in the moonlight. Sweat beaded on his forehead, mixing with the rain. His gray eyes, usually so sharp and predatory, were hazy, losing focus. He reached out, his bloody hand gripping my wrist. His grip was weak, trembling. It was nothing like the iron hold he had yesterday. "Do not run," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper, fighting to stay conscious. "The keys are in my pocket. You have the gun. You can leave. But if you go out there, Salvatore will find you. He will kill you." He slumped forward, his head resting heavily on my shoulder. He was unconscious. I stood there in the mud, the rain washing the blood off my hands, turning the puddle at my feet pink. I reached into his pocket and pulled out the keys to the bike. I felt the weight of the gun tucked into my waistband. I looked at the dark road leading back to civilization. I could leave him here. I could leave the monster to die in the mud and save myself. I could go to the police. I could be free. Then I looked down at him, the man who had shielded me with his own body, the man who had given me a weapon instead of chains, the man who had called me a queen. I looked at the dark, unforgiving forest, then at the dying king at my feet. Elena stands at a fateful crossroads in her life. On one side is freedom, her only chance to escape this madness. On the other is the man who just took a bullet for her, lying dying at her feet. If you were her, would you be cruel enough to leave him lying in the mud? If you've listened this far, please comment with the keyword loyalty below, so I know there are still people accompanying me on this journey. Your presence from around the world is the greatest encouragement for me to continue telling this bloody love story. The transition from the freezing, hostile forest to the interior of the cabin was jarring. I kicked the heavy wooden door shut, sealing out the storm, but the cold seemed to have seeped into my very bones. The cabin was small, smelling of dry pine needles and old dust. It was abandoned, but there was a stack of firewood by the stone hearth. I worked with frantic desperation. I found a box of matches on the mantel. My hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to strike one. Finally, the dry kindling caught. A small flame flickered to life, growing rapidly into a roaring fire that cast long, dancing shadows against the log walls. I turned back to Dante. He was lying on the dusty rug in front of the hearth, his breathing shallow and ragged. The red stain on his white shirt had spread, consuming almost the entire fabric. He looked like a fallen angel, beautiful and broken. "Dante," I whispered, kneeling beside him. I reached for the buttons of his shirt. My fingers were slick with his blood and rain, making it impossible to undo them. With a cry of frustration, I grabbed the fabric and ripped it open. Buttons skittered across the floor like tiny bones. The wound was ugly, a bullet hole in his side just above the hip bone. It was oozing dark, sluggish blood. I looked around. I needed bandages. I needed alcohol. I found a half-empty bottle of whiskey in a cupboard, but no medical supplies. I looked down at my dress. The red silk dress that had cost more than my father's car. Without hesitation, I grabbed the hem. The silk was tough, but my adrenaline was higher. I tore a long strip from the bottom of the gown, ruining the masterpiece. "This is going to hurt," I told him, though his eyes were closed. I poured the whiskey over the wound. Dante's body arched off the floor. A guttural groan ripped from his throat, a sound of pure agony. His eyes flew open, the gray irises blown wide with pain. "Elena," he rasped. "I have to get it out," I said, my voice trembling. "The bullet is still inside. I can feel it." I had taken a first aid course in college, but nothing prepared me for digging into human flesh. I used the small knife I had retrieved from the kitchen fight, sanitizing it in the fire first. "Do it!" Dante gritted out through clenched teeth. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "Don't hesitate!" I took a deep breath and pressed the blade into the wound. He didn't scream. He just gripped my wrist, his fingers digging into my skin with bruising force. I could feel his pain vibrating through me. I dug deeper, tears blurring my vision. Metal clinked against metal. Got it, I sobbed. I flicked the flattened bullet onto the floor. I quickly pressed the pad of silk against the hole, wrapping the long strips around his torso to bind it tight. Dante slumped back, exhausted. His chest heaved. I sat back on my heels, my hands covered in his blood, my red dress torn and ruined, my hair a wild mess. For a long time, the only sound was the crackling of the fire and the rain hammering on the roof. Then Dante turned his head. His eyes were clear now, the haze of shock receding. He watched me. The way he looked at me had changed. The predator was still there, but the hunger was different. It wasn't the hunger to own, it was the hunger to keep. Why? He asked, his voice rough like sandpaper. Why what? I whispered, wiping my hands on a rag. Why didn't you run? He tried to sit up, wincing, but managed to prop himself on one elbow. You had the keys. You had the gun. You could be halfway to the police station by now. Why are you patching up the monster? I looked into the fire. Because you took a bullet for me. I am an investment protector, he scoffed, though the edge in his voice was soft. Damaged goods are worth less. Liar, I said, turning to look at him. You shielded me. You called me a queen. You gave me a weapon instead of locking me away. I took a deep breath. I stayed because I do not want to owe you a life. I pay my debts, Dante. Just like you. He stared at me for a long moment, then he reached out. His hand, warm and blood-stained, cupped the back of my neck. He pulled me down. I didn't resist. I let him pull me until my face was inches from his. You think this clears the ledger? He murmured, his thumb tracing my lower lip. No, Elena. This just binds us tighter. The air between us grew heavy, charged with the scent of blood, whiskey, and smoke. It was a primal scent. The adrenaline of surviving death was crashing into the desire to feel alive. Dante, I have wanted you for 2 years, he confessed, the words tumbling out in a low growl. My eyes widened. What? 2 years ago, the charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum, you were wearing a blue dress, you looked bored, you snuck out to the balcony to smoke a cigarette, even though you don't smoke. I froze. You saw that? I watched you, he corrected. I have been watching you ever since. When your father came to me for the loan, I didn't approve it because of his business plan. I approved it because I knew he would fail. I knew he would offer you up. You planned this? I should have been horrified. I should have been disgusted. But God help me. Looking at this man who had bled for me, all I felt was a twisted sense of awe. He had moved mountains and destroyed empires just to get me in his reach. I planned to take you, he said, his eyes darkening to the color of charcoal. But I didn't plan on this. I didn't plan on you saving me. He pulled me closer, his lips brushing against mine. Kiss me, Elena, or leave, make a choice. I didn't leave. I crashed my lips against his. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate. It was a collision of 2 souls who had just walked through fire. I tasted the whiskey on his tongue, the iron of blood. His hands tangled in my hair, pulling me on top of him, mindful of his wound but needing the weight of me. I straddled his hips, the torn red silk of my dress pooling around us like a sea of blood. The storm raged outside, but inside, the fire burned hotter. There was no coercion tonight. There was no debt. There was only this. Skin against skin, scars against silk, the monster and his willing queen. Morning came too soon. The fire had died down to embers. I was curled against Dante's side, his arm heavy around me. He was sleeping, his face finally peaceful. Then I heard it. Thwop, thwop, thwop. The rhythmic beating of rotor blades. I sat up, clutching the remains of my dress. The sound was getting louder. It was directly above us. Dante, I shook him. Dante, wake up. He opened his eyes, instantly alert. He grabbed his gun from the floor. Stay down, he hissed. But it was too late. Through the dirty window, I saw a black helicopter descending into the clearing. It didn't have police markings. It had a crest I didn't recognize. Men jumped out before the skids even touched the grass. They were heavily armed, and leading them was a man in a beige trench coat. Liam, my stomach dropped. The door to the cabin was kicked open. Dante tried to stand to aim his gun, but his wound tore open. He collapsed, crying out in pain. Liam stepped inside. He looked manic. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair wild. He looked at Dante on the floor, then at me, disheveled, wearing the torn red dress, standing protectively over the Mafia boss. A twisted smile spread across Liam's face. "I found you," he giggled, a sound that made my skin crawl. "I found you, you traitorous bitch." "Liam," I said, my voice steady despite the terror gripping my heart. "Get out." "Get out?" Liam laughed, stepping closer. Two mercenaries flanked him, pointing assault rifles at Dante's head. "I don't think so. I made a deal with Don Salvatore. He wants the Italian. I want what is mine." He grabbed my hair and yanked me away from Dante. "No!" Dante roared, trying to crawl toward me. "Let her go, you coward!" Liam kicked Dante in the ribs, right over his fresh wound. Dante groaned, curling in on himself, blood seeping through the bandages I had just applied. "Stop it!" I screamed, clawing at Liam's face. "Tie him up," Liam ordered his men. "Leave him here. Burn the cabin." "No!" I shrieked as Liam dragged me out the door. "Dante!" The last thing I saw was one of the mercenaries pouring gasoline over the wooden floorboards. Dante was looking at me, his eyes filled with a promise of violence that would shake the earth. Then the match was dropped. Flames roared up, swallowing the cabin. Liam threw me into the back of the helicopter. As we lifted off, I watched the cabin turn into an inferno. Tears streamed down my face. He's dead. He has to be dead. We landed 20 minutes later at an old industrial park on the outskirts of the city. Liam dragged me into a rusted warehouse. It smelled of grease and rot. He threw me onto a dirty mattress in the corner. "Look at you," Liam sneered, pacing back and forth. "Dressed like a whore for him. Did you spread your legs for him, Elena? Did you enjoy it?" I sat up, wiping my tears. I remembered Dante's voice. "Keep your head high. If you bow, the crown falls." I stopped crying. I looked at Liam, really looked at him. He wasn't a man. He was a boy playing with matches. "I did," I said coldly. "He was more of a man in one night than you were in 3 years." Liam's face twisted in rage. He struck me across the face. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. "I saved you!" Liam shouted, pacing like a caged rat. "I was going to come back for you once I had the money, but you just let him claim you." "You sold me, Liam," I spat. "You and my father. Don't pretend this is about love. This is about your ego. You can't stand that the monster wanted me more than you did." He grabbed my throat, pinning me to the mattress. His grip was clammy and weak compared to Dante's. "I'm going to ruin you," he hissed. "I'm going to use you, and when I'm done, I'll send the pictures to the press. Everyone will know Elena Vance is nothing but a mafia whore." He reached for the buckle of his belt. My hand flew to my chest, clutching the diamond necklace Dante had given me. But my fingers brushed against the ring, the skull ring on my left hand. Flashback to part 2. Dante sliding the ring on my finger. "I will always find you." I remembered seeing Dante twist the eye of the skull once. It was a mechanism. While Liam was fumbling with his belt, blinded by his own pathetic lust and rage, I twisted the black diamond eye on the ring. I felt a tiny click. A beacon. It had to be a beacon. "Wait," I said, my voice shifting. I made it sound soft, submissive. "Liam, wait." He paused, looking down at me suspiciously. If we are going to do this," I whispered, forcing a tremble into my lip. Can you take off the ring? It hurts. It reminds me of him." Liam's ego was his weakness. He smiled, a disgusting, triumphant smirk. "That's right. Get that trash off." He let go of my throat to reach for my hand. I let him take the ring off. I needed him distracted. I needed time. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. Liam was staring at the ring, mocking it. "Cheap trash," he muttered. Then he heard it. We both heard it. It wasn't a helicopter. It was the sound of a heavy engine, a roar that shook the corrugated metal walls of the warehouse. "What is that?" Liam asked, looking toward the large bay doors. "It's the wedding reception," I whispered, a feral smile spreading across my bleeding lips. Boom! The metal bay doors didn't just open, they exploded inward. An armored truck, a massive black beast of a vehicle, smashed through the metal like it was paper. It skidded to a halt in the center of the warehouse, debris raining down. Liam scrambled back, dropping the ring. No, he was burning! The side door of the truck flew open. Smoke poured out from the vehicle, mixing with the dust of the warehouse. And from the smoke, a figure emerged. Dante. He looked like the devil himself risen from hell. His white shirt was gone. His chest was wrapped in the bloody silk of my dress, charred and blackened by soot. His face was streaked with ash and blood. He was limping slightly, but he moved with terrifying purpose. In his hands, he held 2 gold-plated Desert Eagles. Behind him, Marco and Enzo stepped out, flanking him with assault rifles. Dante didn't yell. He didn't scream. He stepped over the debris, his eyes locking onto Liam. "I told you." Dante's voice was a low, calm rumble that carried more threat than a scream ever could. "The wedding isn't over." Liam scrambled backward, tripping over his own feet. He wetted himself. The dark stains spread across the front of his beige trousers. "Stay back!" Liam shrieked, pulling a small handgun from his waistband. He pointed it at me, grabbing me as a shield. "I'll kill her, I swear to God, stay back!" Dante stopped. He was 10 feet away. He lowered his guns slowly. "You think I care about God?" Dante tilted his head. "And you think you can pull that trigger faster than I can put a bullet in your eye?" "Get back!" Liam was crying now, snot running down his nose. "I have Salvatore, he's coming!" "Salvatore is dead," Marco spoke up from behind Dante, adjusting his glasses calmly. "We seized his territories 3 hours ago while you were busy playing with matches. You are alone, Liam." Liam's hand shook violently. The gun barrel dug into my temple. I wasn't afraid anymore. I looked at Dante. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. I knew what to do. I slammed my heel down onto Liam's instep, hard. At the same time, I threw my head back, smashing it into his nose. Crunch. Liam howled, instinctively loosening his grip. I dropped to the floor and rolled away. Bang! Dante fired, not at Liam's head, at his hand. Liam screamed as his gun flew across the room along with 2 of his fingers. He fell to his knees, clutching his mangled hand. Dante walked forward. He kicked Liam in the chest, sending him sprawling onto his back. Dante placed a heavy boot on Liam's throat. "Please!" Liam gurgled. "Please, Dante, we're family friends, don't kill me!" Dante looked down at him with pure disgust. Then he looked at me. He holstered one of his guns and held the other one out to me. "Handle first, Elena," Dante said softly. "He is yours." I stood up. I wiped the blood from my lip. I looked at the gun, then at the man who had left me at the altar, the man who had sold me, the man who had tried to burn the love of my life alive. I took the gun. It was heavy, warm from Dante's grip. I walked over to Liam. "Elena, baby," Liam wept. "Don't do this. I love you." "You don't know what love is," I said. My voice was steady, cold as ice. I aimed, not at his heart. I lowered the barrel to his knee. "This is for the betrayal," I whispered. Bang! Liam shrieked, a sound that wasn't human. His kneecap shattered. I shifted the aim to his other knee. "And this," I said, "is for ruining my dress." Bang! Liam passed out from the pain. I lowered the gun. I felt empty but clean. The victim was gone. I turned to Dante. I handed him the gun. "Finish it," I said. "I don't want his blood on my shoes." Dante looked at me with pride shining in his eyes. He took the gun. He nodded to Marco. "Take out the trash," Dante ordered. Marco and Enzo stepped forward to drag Liam's unconscious body away. I turned my back as I heard the final muffled shots ring out outside the warehouse. 1 month later. The sun was shining. It was a brilliant, blinding spring day in New York City. The sky was a perfect, cloudless blue. We were back at St. Patrick's Cathedral, but this time the doors were locked to the public. There were no guests, no whispering relatives, no paparazzi, no judgmental eyes. The pews were empty. I stood at the altar wearing a new dress. It wasn't white. It was black lace, elegant and sharp. Dante stood before me. He had healed. The limp was gone, though I knew the scar on his side would remain forever, a mark of his devotion. He took my hand. "Last time," Dante said, his voice echoing in the vast holy space, "I forced this on you. I put a shackle on your finger and called you property." He reached into his pocket. He pulled out the silver skull ring from my finger. He tossed it onto the marble floor. It clattered away, forgotten. He pulled out a new box. He opened it. Inside sat a single massive emerald-cut diamond, set in platinum. It was flawless. Dante Morelli, the capo of New York, the devil in a suit, got down on one knee. My breath hitched. "Elena," he looked up at me, his gray eyes soft and vulnerable for the first time. "You walked through fire for me. You bled for me. You ruled beside me in the darkness." He held up the ring. "I don't want a hostage. I want a partner. I want a queen. Will you marry me? For real this time? Will you rule this damn city with me? Tears welled in my eyes, not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming, fierce joy. Yes, I whispered, then louder. Yes, I will! He slid the ring onto my finger. He stood up and pulled me into a kiss that tasted of forever. I used to think I was the victim of a monster. I thought my life ended the day the groom fled at the altar. But I was wrong. That was the day my life truly began. I didn't tame the devil. I didn't turn him into a saint. I just learned that sometimes the light is blinding, and the only place you can truly see who you are is in the dark. I became his queen, and believe me, darkness has its own kind of beauty. And that, my friends, is how Elena Vance found her crown in the ashes of a ruined wedding. Her story reminds us of a powerful truth. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to protect us are the ones who hurt us the most, and the ones we are taught to fear become our greatest shield. Loyalty isn't about being perfect. It's about staying when everyone else runs. It's about finding the beauty in the dark and realizing that even a beast can love a queen. Thank you for stepping into the darkness with me today. If Dante and Elena's journey made your heart race, please give this video a like. It helps more than you know. Don't forget to subscribe to Fate's Gentle Hands and turn on that notification bell so you never miss a daily story. Fate has many more secrets to whisper to you. Until next time, stay safe or stay dangerous. The choice is yours.